Right, so Harvey's come onto the show today to talk about pre-existing medical conditions with protection insurance. So we're particularly going to focus on life insurance because it keeps it simple. But the aim of the piece is that we're going to talk about common pre-existing conditions to encourage people to go and seek advice, and also to illustrate that not only can people with these conditions get life insurance, but they can also get it at an affordable rate. So the first thing Harvey's going to do is give us the sort of common thread to start with.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about a few conditions today. We're going to include things like high blood pressure, raised cholesterol, diabetes, epilepsy, and a few other conditions. But what we want to say is that regardless of what medical condition you may have, there are some things that are common to everything. So if you've been diagnosed quite recently, then it may be difficult to get cover, but what you should do is get in touch with an insurance broker and get an application in so that a life insurance company can tell you that. But also, if you have a combination of conditions, then your situation may be slightly different if you have a condition on its own.
So we're going to be talking about percentages and changes to premiums, among other things. So it's probably useful to start the piece off when we talk about, we're just going to give some generic numbers. You can't take these numbers and apply them to your own circumstances, even though you're watching or listening to this particular part of the podcast. But can you give some ballpark figures about for the cost of life insurance for different age ranges?
Absolutely. So when you're looking at life insurance, the younger you are, the less expensive it is. So if you're 25 years old and you want, say, £250,000 worth of life cover, maybe over the next 20 years, that's about £5 a month. You know, if you pushed it up to somebody that was 35 years old, that might go up to somewhere more like £8 or £9 a month. So the older you are, the more it costs, and it will cost more if you're also a smoker. Your premiums are calculated based on your age and your smoker status.
So if you're a smoker, is there like a finger in the air kind of percentage difference that somebody who is a smoker compared to a non-smoker, how much their premium would be higher?
Roughly twice. So it's not an exact science, but roughly twice is what a smoker would pay compared with a non-smoker.
Okay, so for the rest of this piece of the podcast, if you keep those figures that Harvey's mentioned in mind, and you can do the maths yourself in terms of identifying the impact of different medical conditions. But really the takeaway is, as you listen to what Harvey's got to explain on the various different conditions, is that it is still affordable. Some protection is better than none, so you can adjust your budgets. But really, I want people to realise that if you've got a pre-existing condition, I think some people think, well, it's not worth me applying just yet because I might not get accepted. We're going to dispel that myth. And also, if you've got a pre-existing condition, I'd actually personally argue it's even more reason why you probably need to be taking out life insurance now or seeking advice. So let's kick off with the first condition.
So the first one we chose was high blood pressure, largely because it's quite common. A lot of people do have high blood pressure, and actually quite a large number of people have undiagnosed high blood pressure and sometimes discover that whilst they're applying for life insurance. So it may be something that you're not aware of, but if you're on medication for high blood pressure and it's controlled, there's no reason why you can't get life insurance, and actually you may not even spend more on your life insurance than somebody who doesn't have high blood pressure. So generally, as a rule of thumb, life insurance companies like for conditions to be controlled, even if it's with medication or dietary changes, that your condition, if it's diagnosed, is within control. The range that we look at for high blood pressure is somewhere between 90/60 and 120/80. So that's sort of a normal range of blood pressure. And if you're within that range and it's been controlled over a period of time, there's no reason why you can't get life insurance. And even if it's not controlled, you should still apply for life insurance, because if the insurance company deems there to be a little bit of a risk there, they may charge you a little bit more. So instead of that £5 that we talked about earlier, you might end up spending £8 or £9 or maybe £10 a month for your life insurance. But the important thing is you can review that. So if you manage to control your blood pressure over a period of time, you can go back to the insurance company and say, my blood pressure is controlled now. Can you relook at this?
And would that be a whole new application with the same insurers? Your existing policy stays in place and they review your existing plan, or would you be going to somebody new?
Sometimes. So insurance companies change their guidelines from time to time. So it really depends on how long that period of time between you first applying and then coming back to your application is, because some insurance companies will require a new application if you go beyond a certain point. So it might be in 12 months' time that your old application isn't valid anymore, but within 6 months, perhaps you can revisit it, but that will be on an insurer-to-insurer basis.
So we're going to move on to the next condition. The next condition is
high cholesterol. So a little bit in line with high blood pressure, it follows the same pattern. So if your cholesterol has been raised in the past or you're on medication for high cholesterol, then as long as it is controlled with the medication, no reason why you can't get life insurance. And actually, sometimes, again, you may not even have to pay more to secure that life insurance. So it's really nothing to worry about. It's fairly common. Some people don't have it as a result of lifestyle. Some people have it because it's a hereditary condition that can pass down in the family. So insurance companies do look at that, and they do look at your health in the round before they make decisions. So they won't just treat you as a blanket, you've ticked the high cholesterol box, therefore we will treat you X. It really does depend on how you're managing your health and how you're managing that condition. But again, it's one really not to worry about. You're more than likely going to get life insurance. You may have to pay a little bit more in very, very small number of cases, but most people will be able to secure life insurance quite easily.
And so before we do the next condition, I think it's actually worth pointing out to people that when you take out a product, if you develop any of these conditions subsequently, it doesn't matter. It's not your premium's going to change, because if you've got a fixed contract, then the premium will stay the same as a guaranteed premium. You don't have to tell the insurer. So that is a completely separate thing. It's one of the reasons why you should get insurance when you're young if you need it, because your premium should be lower before you develop some other potential condition that would be treated as pre-existing. So next on the list is...
We're going to talk about asthma. Asthma is fairly common. A lot of people suffer with it. Some people grow out of it, but some people will carry an inhaler. Maybe they haven't had an asthma attack in a very long period of time, but it's something you're asked about as part of your life insurance application, and therefore you should disclose it if it's something that you've been diagnosed with. Now, asthma doesn't present a problem for people applying for life insurance in most cases, but if you're a smoker and you have asthma, that may mean that the life insurance company will charge you a little bit more for your life insurance. Again, it shouldn't predicate you from having life insurance. It's merely a case of you're in a higher risk category if you're smoking and you've got asthma, as far as their guidelines will be concerned. Some insurance companies may be more lenient than others, and I think that's something that we should caveat for all conditions, that insurance companies don't have the same guidelines, they don't work with the same set of rules. So you may find that even if one insurance company has increased your premium, that another insurance company is happy to accept you without any increase to the premium, and that's quite normal to find as well. And you won't discover that unless you talk to an expert and really have the ability to shop the whole market. One of the other things that you should look at when you're looking at asthma is, if you're an asthma sufferer, have you been hospitalised in the last 2 years? If you have, that's something that can affect your application. It doesn't have to mean that your life insurance will be declined, but it's something that they ask about. If you need oral steroids, that's another thing that they will ask you about. But again, if you've recovered and your asthma is controlled, whether you use a preventative inhaler or a reliever, and you can discuss those things with the life insurance company. Generally, if your condition is controlled with the medication that you use, again, you don't really pose an extra risk and you should be accepted for life insurance.
And one thing I just want to point out, because there'll be people listening to the different nuances of the decisions that can be made based upon your pre-existing condition and your medical history. Never be tempted to not tell the truth on these things, because you will fall foul, or you'll potentially fall foul of non-disclosure. So if an insurer, or let's say something was happening, you were to die, and the insurer might not pay out because you didn't disclose something on your medical history that they in the end found out about. And just to cover the point, how could they actually find out that you hadn't disclosed?
It's not a rule, but if insurance companies are suspicious about the cause of your death and that somehow you've died from a particular condition, and they're suspicious about how you disclosed your health at the time that you applied, and also even if it's a random check, insurance companies can write to your doctor for a full report of your health. even if they didn't do that at the time that you applied, they may go back and check your health records when a death claim is made. Now, if something evidences that you had knowledge of symptoms or a condition that was diagnosed or ailments that you suffered that you didn't disclose and you were asked about as part of the application, then you can fall into the non-disclosure bracket. Now, I'm going to caveat that with only about 1% of life insurance claims ever get declined, but the vast majority of that 1% are because of non-disclosure. So don't fall into that trap.
And I don't want people to be frantic about have I forgotten about anything in particular in my medical history, because somebody like me who has quite a complicated medical history, the insurer will inevitably write to your GP, but there are instances where you can actually request that they do because you don't know all the detail and you can't put it in the box. So it is better that way round, because you might end up finding that when they review the details, they won't necessarily, your condition isn't as bad as you think from an insurer's point of view. So that is an important point. So next condition, it's epilepsy, isn't it?
It is. So epilepsy is a common condition. People live with it. It can affect your life insurance application. But if you're applying for life insurance and you have epilepsy, they will ask you if you have the grand mal type, the petit mal type. If you haven't had a seizure for a long period of time, you've probably got nothing to worry about. You'll get life insurance if your symptoms are controlled. If you have had seizures and they're frequent and they're recent, then it might be a little bit more difficult to get life insurance. But again, you speak to an expert, they will put you in touch with an insurance company that is more lenient in their guidelines for epilepsy, because not all insurance companies will treat that the same. And it is important that you find the right insurance company for your particular symptoms of it, not just the condition itself.
Okay, moving on to the next condition.
Cancer, the big C one. So people that have had cancer often have a fear of death. And I think that actually it prompts people to think about life insurance, because I think a cancer diagnosis gives us that jolt that, perhaps life is finite and we should look at things like life insurance. But if you've been diagnosed with cancer in the past, you will still be able to apply for life insurance as long as there has been a certain period of time. So you're talking about a couple of years, what people usually call the remission period. So if you're in remission, you haven't had any treatment, your treatment's been complete for some time, and dependent on the type of cancer that you had and the staging that it was, you may be able to get life insurance still. And a lot of people just think after cancer they won't be able to get life insurance, but it is good to ask the question, go down the route of an application. The experts that we'll link to in the programme notes will tell you, they won't waste your time. So they'll tell you if your cancer means you can't get covered, they'll tell you straight off. So you won't have wasted your time, because they won't waste your time going through an application unless you can get cover. But for a lot of cancer survivors, life insurance is possible and you can arrange it.
So that will come as a surprise to quite a few people. As Harvey mentioned, we will be talking a little bit later about the people you can get in contact with to get advice, because one of the key things is when you go online and you may do a quote, the price that you see there will be often the assumption, because there won't be any medical questions associated with it, the cheapest insurer you might go for example. That won't necessarily be the best. What you've got to focus on is the ultimate premium that you will pay, but you won't know that until you've gone through that medical underwriting and they've seen evidence of your medical history. But the advisors, the people, the experts who deal with this all the time actually have insight into which insurers will be most lenient with certain conditions. So moving on, one of the conditions you're going to talk about is Crohn's, isn't it?
It is.
my personal favourite as a Crohn sufferer.
I think, Damien, you can tell us all about Crohn's because you've applied for life insurance, you have life insurance in place, and you have had it in the past during periods when your Crohn's was good, and also during periods where your Crohn's wasn't so good. Yeah,
so for me, again, going back to a lot of the stuff you've been talking about already on this, I once applied at the point that I bought a house. I had an operation on my bowel, and looking back now, that's probably caused by stress. And I was refused. Well, I was postponed is the actual term. Life insurance. I applied because obviously I was taking out a new mortgage, and so they wouldn't cover me. They postponed me until after the operation that I'd had, and it was a period of about, I think it wasn't very long, it was up to about 6 months, and then I could apply again. And then But in the meantime, my wife was able to be covered because we got a separate policy. So it was fine. It's better to have some protection than none. And so after that postponement, then I was able to apply. And then I ended up getting a rating. And the percentage was about, for me, I think then was about 50%. And it all depends on your personal circumstances, but it does vary. It also does vary depending on the treatments that you have. There'll be people who have stomas, for example, and they may have had lots of operations or may have complications because of their Crohn's. So that can vary, but there are insurers that do look upon Crohn's in a, I wouldn't say favourably, but they're probably a little bit more kind in their assessment. So the premiums could be much higher than what I pay now for my life insurance. So what I would say, I'm evidence that you should definitely shop around. And subsequent to the scenario I just described, I did apply again to a different insurer, and my premiums were slightly lower as part of me moving house. And so it's something that is worth reviewing because my health got better over time because of the treatment I had.
And that's quite interesting because I think that some people, when they've bought their life insurance, if they had a condition and perhaps it was recently diagnosed, may be paying more than what they need to because they haven't revisited that life insurance. And it may be now because they've made some progress with that condition and it's controlled and they've perhaps recovered from the symptoms and they're not having as many flare-ups, that they should revisit that life insurance because they may be paying more than what they need to.
And on a point you mentioned earlier, I don't want to just focus on Crohn's because I suffer from it, but when I was the first of a number of operations I had sort of way more than a decade ago, and some of the drugs didn't exist, but there are certain drugs now that I take as an infusion every 2 months. So I sit in the hospital, have a drip, talk to the nurses, get a cup of tea, and that keeps it in almost remission. It keeps it under control. So I haven't had a flare up of any kind now for probably about a decade. So that is different to when I applied, say, 15 years ago. That wasn't an option. Surgery was pretty much the only option I had at that point. So the landscape also changes. So inevitably, underwriters' view of certain conditions will change over time because mine is now, thankfully, I say touch wood, under control, but it wasn't back then.
No, absolutely. And I think many conditions do get better with treatment, and there are advances in medical science, in medical research that help people to live longer with certain conditions than they perhaps did in the past. And that's a large reason why underwriting guidelines do improve for those conditions. So the other one that we're going to talk about today, Damien, is diabetes. Again, really common. Diabetes is, you can have type 1, you can have type 2. Type 1 is the one where people take insulin, and type 2 is the one where generally you'll be taking some kind of medication, or it may be diet and lifestyle controlled. Now, diabetics generally will see some sort of increase to their life insurance costs because of the risks that are associated with diabetes, because diabetes can lead to cardiac problems. And for those people that have diabetes, if it's uncontrolled, you're likely to pay more. So you're probably still going to get life insurance. That's the upside. But it's how much you're going to pay for that life insurance. So if you're a diabetic and you're a good diabetic, now diabetics that are listening to this will understand HbA1c, which is your sort of control reading if you're a diabetic. If your HbA1c reading is good and shows good control, then you're likely to pay less. And if that's over a long period of time, even better, you'll pay even less. If it's not so controlled, again, we've got to go back to the same thing as the Crohn's. You know, you pay what you need to now, but you review it in a period of time. So if you feel that it's more controlled now, you're on top of your diabetes and your checks are regular, then you'll pay less. So review your life insurance. So again, if you're somebody who started your life insurance at a time when it cost quite a lot because of your diabetes, but now your diabetes is well managed, again, revisit your life insurance.
Okay, so we're going to rattle through the last of the conditions.
Yes, we are. So it's quite common for people to disclose a period of depression, stress, anxiety, other mental health disorders. Life insurance applications do ask you about your mental health, so be prepared. If you have had an episode of this is something that you may have to disclose. It's completely understandable if people don't want to talk about it, but say yes, because that will avoid the situation where a life insurance claim might be declined once you put your life insurance in place. You can refer it to your doctor. So you can ask the insurance company to ask your doctor about things. But largely, you'll be able to give a lot more information about your period of mental health than perhaps your doctor will. So very often life insurance companies want to look at things in the round. So if there's been a trigger for a mental health episode that you've had, and that could be work stress, it might be a bereavement, it might be anything else, life challenges us and some of us respond in different ways. Life insurance companies are quite lenient with that because it's a natural part of life to react in that way. But actually, if it's something that's chemical, it might be treated slightly differently. Again, you should speak to the experts because life insurance is available to people that have had depression, stress, anxiety, bipolar disorder, these types of conditions in the past, or perhaps still are living with them. But if they're controlled and you're on medication, don't let that be a reason why you don't apply for life insurance. It's available for you. So the other thing that comes up on life insurance applications quite commonly is your height and your weight. So you are asked, and people find this quite an intrusive question sometimes when you're going through an application with somebody, but your height and your weight will be asked, and that gives them something called your body mass index. And your BMI, if people have come across that before, is an indicator of the distribution of weight across your height. You can use the NHS calculator and work out your BMI. We'll put it in the notes. But if your BMI is less than 30, generally no problems getting life insurance. You'll be absolutely fine. If it's slightly more than 30, again, you probably still will get life insurance and you probably won't have to pay any more than anyone else for your life insurance. Now, if you get over 35 and coming towards 40, you may have to look at insurance companies that are a bit more lenient with their underwriting guidelines for that. They will ask you things like your waist size if you're a man and your dress size if you're a woman. That kind of gives them your body shape. People that carry more weight in their middle generally treated a little bit more poorly than people who have a distribution of weight. So that's another indicator, and you can offer that information to the insurance company. If you feel that you're a muscly person, perhaps you're into your bodybuilding and that's why you carry a bit more weight, the insurance company usually take that on board, but you shouldn't really pay more if you're within those parameters. And if you do pay more, you'll find that by shopping around and finding the right insurance company, you pay less. And the last thing we want to talk about is family history of conditions. So some people are surprised when a life insurance application will ask them about their family history of health. So if your mother, father, brother or sister, and those are the only people you have to worry about, you don't have to worry about your cousins and your aunties and uncles and grandparents, your life insurance application will only ask you about your immediate birth natural family. They will ask if they have had certain kinds of conditions. Cancer is a big one. It's only if they were diagnosed before 65 or 60. If you don't know this information, better to say you don't know. So if you're unsure about giving that information, say you don't know. But if you do say yes, generally having one family member that's had a condition that you've had to say yes to won't stop you from getting life insurance. You probably won't have to pay any more than the next person. If you've got multiple members of family who have a particular condition and there's a strong hereditary link to that condition, then the insurance company may charge you a little bit more for your life insurance because they may see that as a risk. Again, shop around. I sound like I'm saying the same thing again, but it is so important because insurance companies do not work to the same guidelines. And just because one insurance company has either declined you or charged you a large amount extra on top of your premium doesn't mean that the next insurance company won't. And one of the interesting things that you and I were talking about before we came in to record this was that actually often if you go to a comparison site and you find the cheapest insurance company, they're probably the strictest in their guidelines because they like to keep their risks low in order to give those very cheap quotes. And you may have to just go to an insurance company that may only be 50 pence a pound more, and suddenly their underwriting guidelines are so much better for you.
So everybody listening to this podcast, I'm sure there's lots of people who will be wanting to access Harvey's encyclopedic knowledge about everything to do with protection. What I will say is that Harvey has probably written about most conditions associated with an application for things like life insurance. So do search on the Money to the Masses website because you'll find out lots of information on there about lots of different conditions that we haven't had time to talk about. And I know Harvey was saying she was conscious about saying shopping around, but there's an important point. For me, for example, I used a company of experts in their field who could access all different insurers, know their underwriting guidelines to give me the best policy for me. So that company, we will put a link in the notes of this podcast, because as I say, I've used them. Most people within Money to Masses have used them for their life insurance or protection needs. Now, as a complete disclosure, the advice is free, and using that link doesn't actually make any difference in terms of price, but it does also help Money to Masses because it is a referral link. So if you want to help the Money to Masses podcast in any way, then go through that link, but it doesn't matter if you don't want to. You can still access their services. The prices will be the same, the advice will be the same, but I do suggest, even if you have a conversation and you don't end up doing anything, because there is no obligation, the advice is free, do contact them if you've got any questions. And if you've even got existing policies you may think need to be reviewed, it's not just for people who are out there thinking, I've been putting this off, it's now time for me to actually have a conversation. It's for people who've got existing policies like I did. So make sure you do. I think that was a fantastic piece, Harvey. I'd love to think there are people out there now who are more likely to engage with protection like life insurance and not keep putting it off. I know there'll be people out there who will, taking your BMI example, maybe thinking, do you know what, I'll wait to apply when I've lost the weight because I'm more likely to be accepted or more likely to get a cheaper premium. But the reality is life is busy, things change. So I would urge people to seek advice because you may be pleasantly surprised about what you can get.